Well, hello there. That's right. It's a Saturday and we're doing a podcast. Hope everybody's having a good Saturday. At the time I do this, it's 10:30 in the morning, and I have, yet again, been up all night. This is Dave the Nerd Emperor, and this is, of course, the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast, and we are now on Season 1, Episode 26. Today's date is Saturday, March 28th. 2026. As always, you can follow us not just on Spotify, where we began, but on Amazon, Audible, and iHeartRadio as well. Meanwhile, if you want to help us get better tech, you can donate through our Patreon page, which I'll mention in a minute. And you can also do it through Cash App and Venmo. Each handle is the same on Cash App and Venmo. It's WSPD Pod. Dang, I'm fresh out of water to drink. It's going to be a rough hour. Anyway, we have a Patreon page, as I said, for subscribers to sponsor us. And yeah, you can donate there, but don't donate, subscribe. Because then you can get stuff in exchange for it. And that's what I really want to do, as I've said before. I want to offer goods and services in exchange for it, because that's how it all was supposed to work. But it's as cheap as $3 a month for premium content. You can get all the premium content for just $11.99. That includes special members-only podcasts that are live video sessions that appear once a week. There's all kinds of gaming stuff in the works. And to be honest, because of the sleep deprivation thing, as I said, I'm a little bit behind. But we're catching up, and we're making good progress. So anyway, the first 6 chapters of my first completed novel, Love's Crucible, are on there now, with the 7th one going up on Sunday. First chapter is available there for free, so you can get a taste. You can become a sponsor to read the rest as it comes out, and as all my future works come out, for as little as $3 a month. Now, I set that at $3 a month, meaning that the new novels that come out as they're being released chapter by chapter, you can read them all. $3. Okay? Not much. It's a cup of coffee. So you can support a writer who's been writing literally all his adult life. I was talking about it with my best friend earlier this morning, and the first job that I had that had benefits was actually at a newspaper. So I've been writing my entire life, and the first job I had as an adult that was a permanent job that had benefits was working as a sports writer. So there you go. I'm not counting the seasonal job that I had at a department store where I only worked 6 weeks and left there because, oh God, that was awful. Let me put it to you this way. That department store chain no longer frickin' exists. They were so badly run. But anyway, moving on now. That's enough of that. It is time for the show, and we're going to talk about war, as that's the first word in the title of the podcast. And I want to apologize. I said in yesterday's podcast, number 25, that I was going to tell you folks what a technical was. A technical in military terms, it comes, I believe, from the very early 1990s when the U.S. was supplying foreign aid to some countries, and it involved technical support, I believe is how it was referred to. Said technical support included equipment. Said equipment included automobiles, specifically trucks with open beds on the back. And then basically what it was we would supply, say, Toyota pickup trucks that the U.S. government would buy wholesale and then supply them to various quasi-military organizations. Those quasi-military organizations and militias, or whatever you might want to call them, and even the armed forces of some nations, would then take those pickup trucks and put a special mount in the bed of the truck and put a machine gun or a rocket launcher or an anti-tank weapon or something like that in the back. And they got known as technicals. So basically what a technical is it's a pickup truck with usually a machine gun of some sort mounted in the back that's used by irregular semi-military or quasi-military forces. For instance, there were technicals used against our troops in the infamous Black Hawk Down episode that happened in Somalia in, early 1993? I think that was in the last few weeks of George H.W. Bush's one term in office where that happened, if I'm not mistaken. So the technicals are used by a number of nations all over the place, and that's what a technical is. So Update on the Third Gulf War, the fighting between U.S. and Israeli and soon-to-be more countries' forces and the IRGC in Iran. Allied airstrikes have been seen targeting areas known to host satellite signal jammers in various locations in Iran. And what they're doing is, you can actually find charts online and information showing that internet usage in Iran came to a clanking, grinding halt. It was already a little spotty because of censorship and governmental controlled shutdowns of access to the World Wide Web beforehand. But on February 28th, the IRGC shut the internet down, basically, in Iran in toto, and people getting out from under that blackout have been basically using Starlink terminals and things of that ilk to get around it, but there's not been much of it. And I can tell you right now, folks, for those of you that are wondering whether or not we're, quote, winning or not winning, unquote, this military action, well, a country that's winning a war doesn't shut down the internet to keep word of what's happening from getting out. And if your country's winning a war, stuff in your capital city isn't routinely being blown up by enemy aircraft. Of course, they're not enemy aircraft to the people of Iran. People of Iran, by and large, are calling it a rescue mission, this Operation Epic Fury. So, think of it what you will, but that's what they're calling it. So the vicious spiral that getting rid of the satellite jammers is going to create, though, is as follows. What's going to happen is, the more internet access the people of Iran have, the more the truth gets out, the more you see footage of what's going on there, and you'll see more of the atrocities that were committed by the IRGC. And what's more, the populace has already been sending in latitude, longitude coordinates of the locations of IRGC forces, because they've been, moving around a little bit to try to evade, we'll just call them Allied aircraft, because we already knew at the beginning where a lot of their stuff was, but now they're trying to hide it. And with the internet being available to people more often, then those people, because 95 to 97% of the population of Iran hates the IRGC. They only have 3 to 4% support among the populace. Okay, so call it 3 million people out of 90 support the IRGC, and they're largely scumbags or horribly misguided people. But they can send in these coordinates so that Allied air forces can then launch airstrikes, whether it's drones, whether it's missiles, whether it's actual airstrikes using dummy or smart ordnance, whatever the case may be. Then that's what's going to happen. And as that happens, the control that the IRGC is attempting to exert over the populace will continue to be degraded, and the populace will become more emboldened, and more launch coordinates will be sent in to American and Israeli intelligence forces, and more targets will be hit, and so on and so forth. I'm telling you, it's a matter of time. And remember, the air war against Iraq in 1991 lasted about 5 or 6 weeks. We're wrapping up week 4, just starting week 5 of this today, and Iran is twice the size and twice the population of Iraq. So I'm telling you right now, I'm very confident and very optimistic. And I don't tend to be an optimistic person. Okay, especially if you read my Twitter feed, I'm pretty jaded. But I really see a positive outcome coming from this. So just hang in there, Iranian people. The time is coming for you to rise up. Some of them have already begun to do so, as you learned from the last podcast, that they're starting to ambush these IRGC Islamo-fascist bastards and shoot them in the streets, literally. So we will see. Another big announcement was that the U.S. Navy, it's been confirmed several days ago, actually, but there's just only so many hours in the day and so much time I can spend on podcasts. There's news breaking as I'm doing this podcast right now, I'm sure, that's relevant to the actions over there. But the U.S. Navy has announced they are deploying drone boats to combat IRGC naval vessels. And what these are is boats that could have some of the same abilities of a land technical. They could have weapons and ordnance of some sort on them including large quantities of explosives, and the drones could be used as suicide vessels to go after the IRGC's remaining naval assets. Why risk a $2 billion U.S. DDG guided missile destroyer when you can send in a $20,000 drone and accomplish largely the same mission? We're basically making the IRGC fight on the terms that they were trying to make us fight on, because they've got drone ships and things like that as well that they're trying to use. So we're giving them a taste of their own medicine. Also, in other words, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is really pissed off at the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Council Corps, whatever the hell they're called. And they have announced that they have pledged, get this, a $1.4 trillion commitment to U.S. involvement in the Iran affair. So what this basically means is Arab states are now starting to pay us to bomb the crap out of the IRGC. Okay? That's how things are going in the Middle East. Don't listen to the slop and the network news. This is how it's happening right now. The entire Arab world is beginning to turn against Iran, as I've said. The Emirates, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia was hit by a missile in the middle of the night last night, I believe it was, and Saudi said that any further strikes on their soil by Iranian ordnance of any type was going to trigger a military response. So it's entirely possible that now the Saudis are going to start blowing crap up in Iran as well. This is what happens when you have a rogue state that's running out of allies. And now you hear that the Houthis down in Yemen are starting to fire stuff at Israel because Iran can't do it anymore. So now they're asking their proxies to fight the battle for and with them. I'm telling you, man, the beast is flailing in its death throes, and it's just a matter of time. All right, moving on to sports. I actually had something for sports, but I'm going to level with you. I forgot to write it down. I don't remember what it was. I think it was baseball related because we're early in baseball season. I can take a minute right now to lament the fact that pretty much every baseball game now is behind a paywall of some sort, and I don't know how long that business model is going to hold up. I got to level with you. People are not going to be interested in watching a game if they have to pay per view to watch every single game, or have to spend $100 or $200 to buy a package for a team that could lose 100 games this year. The NFL being on network TV, by and large, not all of it, but I'd say 2/3 of it is on, CBS, Fox, and NBC/Peacock, is a little bit different. Plus, there are far fewer games. There are 162 baseball games in a regular season. There's only 17 football games in a regular season per team. Counting in the bye week, everybody has an 18-week schedule. But one of those weeks, obviously, they do not play. So people might be a little more willing to shell out money for something that happens once a week than to shell out money for something that happens daily. I don't know. I don't spend money on sports whatsoever. Sports paid me for quite a while when I worked in the newspaper business covering it. And having seen what I've seen and knowing what I know, pro sports isn't worth paying to see. I'll just put it that way. I could get into the reasons, but that will be in my hideously overpriced tell-all book known as, the title for that is No Groaning in the Press Box, and we'll hear about that down the road as that gets finished. I haven't even started on that one, but I've already got some of the vignettes worked out. Just got to figure out how to organize them and how I want to present that. But yes, I will be selling an autobiography of my time as a sports writer sometime down the road. It just hasn't come to pass yet. And it should be entertaining because I'm not going to pull any punches. And remember, if it's true, it can't be considered libel or slander. Just remember that. I'm not going to try to make a point to say anything bad about anybody or make anybody look bad, but I'm not going to make crap up. I don't need to. 17 years in the sports writer business, I've got some stories, boy, I've got them. And you've heard some of my other stories during the anecdotal evidence segment of this podcast. So I've got some experiences to relate. And I haven't even started making stuff up yet. Wait till I get to that point. when I start telling you, okay, this story's a bunch of crap, and then I relay one, well, so far so good. Haven't come anywhere near needing to make anything up. Everything I've told you so far has been true, and it's been quite a ride. Now, moving on to politics, we're going to talk about some illegal immigration numbers, and yeah, I got to tell you, folks, this is a revelation to me to a degree, but on the other hand, not really. It really confirms my suspicions and validates my argument, because people have said for years, and the thing about it is they've been saying the same thing for years, that there are around, and you can say it with me, 11 million illegal immigrants currently residing in the United States. Okay, look, I have first heard that number in 1994. It's been 32 years. You think that number has remained static? That it hasn't gone up? Well, I've got some evidence for you here right now that you're gonna want to know. What this is the net immigration numbers in terms of illegal entries by presidential administration since the beginning of Ronald Reagan's first term. Now, I got this from the End Wokeness Twitter account, but I actually looked it up online and found two different places that corroborated this. So this is not just a tweet I saw. This is something that I've made sure to back up and vet. Now, there was some discrepancy over the first term of Trump between the two sites, and there was some discrepancy over a couple years of the Bill Clinton administration. But one of the discrepancies was on the high side, and one of the discrepancies was on the low side, and they almost canceled each other out. So the variation, the deviation from the numbers I'm seeing here, wasn't wide enough for me to really want to change them. And if I did, I don't know if I'd modify them up or down. So in the interest of trying to be as objective as I can based on what information I can, we're just going to go with the numbers that I saw here. And here's what they are. What this is illegal immigration numbers by president on a monthly basis since January 20th, 1981, when Ronald Reagan was sworn in to start the first of his two terms as the 40th president of the United States. Okay? Okay, here we go. And I'm going to break it down for you, president by president, then we're going to add it all up at the end. And then I'm going to say a couple of things, and I think you're going to agree with me on it. So here we go. Ronald Reagan, the net illegal immigration number for Reagan by month was plus 50,000. So that meant that every month during the 8 years of Ronald Reagan's administration, 50,000 people came into the United States illegally. Every single month, on average, over an 8-year period. Well, 1 year of that is 600,000 people. So 8 years of that is 4,800,000 people. Okay? During George H.W. Papa Bush's single term, the number increased to 55,000. So what that means is during the course of his term, well, 55 times 12 is 660. 660,000 times 4 is 2.64 million. All right, so far, just from 1981 to January 1993, we're looking at over 7 million illegal immigrants entering the nation. Okay? Bill Clinton's administration, 8 years, 67,000 people per month on average. Okay? And just to refresh myself here, because I didn't write that total down, that comes to 6,432,000 more illegal immigrants entering the United States during Clinton's 8 years in office. During George H.W. Bush's term in office, 2 terms in office, the average number of illegal entries into the United States increased to 75,000 per month, for a net total of an additional 7.2 million illegal immigrants from January 20th, 2001 to January 20th, 2009. That brings us to the Barack Obama administration. Despite his deporting 2.5 or 3 million people, I forget, let's say it was 3, the net immigration per month into this country illegally only dropped around 10% to 68,000 a month. As with George W. Younger Bush, Barack Obama served 2 terms in office, and this 68,000 a month comes out to 6,528,000 illegal immigrants entering the country above and beyond the ones that were deported. That's a net increase of 6.528 million. That brings us to the first term that Donald Trump served from 2017, from January 20th, 2017 to January 20th, 2021. The number dropped to 40,000 a month. Well, 40,000 times 48 months is 1,920,000 people. Okay? We'll give you a total at the end. During Joe Biden's 4 years in office, the number jumped astronomically to an average influx of 200,000 illegal immigrants per month. And I must tell you this right now. I am of the opinion, because I remember seeing statistics in the 1990s on network TV news that corroborated this opinion, that these numbers are far higher. I remember seeing a graphic on one news broadcast that said 3.4 million illegal aliens enter in an average year, and 1.4 million of those come in through California alone. But we'll assume that I never saw that statistic and that it's not accurate. And we'll go with these instead. These are much less brutal, but they're still brutal. And the brutality here is 9.6 million illegal immigrants entered the country. 9.6 million illegal immigrants entered the United States during Joe Biden's 4 years asleep in the White House. 9.6 million people. To put that in perspective, I live in the state of Maryland, which has a population of, I want to say, around 5.5 million people. Let me look that up real quick. I'm going to look up states with populations of under 9.6 million. All right. So here we go. Let's look at the states here. List of U.S. states and territories by population. Here we go. Census data. Now, these are going to be estimated numbers as of July 1st of last year. And we will rank them, for simplicity's sake, from most populated to least. The following states have a population of less than 9.6 million. The 9.6 million illegal immigrants that entered the country represents a larger number of people than all of the people who live in any one of the following states: New Jersey, Virginia, Washington, Arizona, Tennessee, Massachusetts, Indiana, Missouri, Maryland, 6.26 million, by the way, so I was off by 10%. Colorado, Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Carolina, Alabama, Louisiana, Kentucky, Oregon, Oklahoma, Connecticut, Utah, Nevada, Iowa, the territory of Puerto Rico, Arkansas, Kansas, Mississippi, New Mexico, Idaho, Nebraska, West Virginia, Hawaii, New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, Montana, Delaware, South Dakota, North Dakota, Alaska, the District of Columbia, Vermont, Wyoming, and then it lists the territories of Guam, the Virgin Islands, Samoa, and the Northern Marianas. Just roughing it out, it looks like if you counted and added up Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware, Rhode Island, Montana, Maine, New Hampshire, and part of Hawaii, okay, there were still more illegal immigrants than the populations of those 10 states and part of an 11th. I think it's 10. Let's look. New Hampshire, Maine, Montana, Rhode Island, Delaware, the Dakotas, Alaska, Vermont, Wyoming. That's 10. Plus a chunk of Hawaii. Just in 4 years under Sleepy Joe the Hair Sniffer. Okay? Now, that brings us to the second term, which hasn't been completed yet, of the Trump administration. He, of course, joining Grover Cleveland as being the only two presidents to serve non-consecutive terms of office. In the second Trump term, to date, the average net illegal immigration in the country has plummeted to negative 145,000 people per month. Okay, and there have been 14 months, if you count from January 20th of last year to March 20th of this year. That's 14 months. Okay? So 14 times 145,000 gives us a little bit over 2 million. 2,030,000 off of the illegal immigration voter rolls. Or not voter rolls, but they're illegal immigrants on the voter rolls. We'll discuss that some other time. Let's just say this much. If you can get a driver's license in a state where you're an illegal immigrant, you can register to vote in a state where you are an illegal immigrant. I've seen it happen here in Maryland at the DMV, because when you get your license, they register you to vote on the spot if you're so inclined. It's part of the automated questionnaire. Okay? Anyway, the net number from the combined illegal immigration influx of the Reagan, Bush 1, Clinton, Bush 2, Obama, Trump, and Biden years comes to over 39 million illegal immigrants. 39 million. That's more than live in the state of California. That's more than live in something like the bottom 22 states in the Union. Combined. And people want us to believe, certain people want us to believe, that there are only 11 million people here? You do understand that the only way that would be possible would be if the illegal immigrants who come here have a life expectancy of about 10 years. Okay? Because what this means is, with 39 million people coming into the country in the last 45 years, almost 75% of them would have had to have died. Now, I'm not the biggest sociologist and social scientist in the world, but I'm going to go ahead and guess that a 19-year-old who snuck across the border in 2004, there were probably hundreds of thousands of those. Tens of thousands. I'm pretty sure they're not all dead. What I'm saying is that there's no way in hell there's only 11 million illegal immigrants in this country. Okay? What I'm saying is either A, there are mass graves of illegals waiting to be found somewhere by hikers, or B, someone is completely and utterly full of shit. I'm going to go with option B, because there's just no way that the overwhelming majority of the 39 million people who came to this country illegally since Reagan was sworn in, back when I was in 5th freaking grade, are dead now. Okay? Or that they none had any children. Now, granted, that's where the 14th Amendment comes in. And what that means is, yeah, they may have had children, but if they came here and had the child on American soil, then those children are not considered illegal immigrants. They are what are called anchor babies to some, and they are born American citizens because of the 14th Amendment. Now, the Supreme Court is taking up the case over birthright citizenship to determine whether or not that should hold. I personally am of the opinion that they will uphold it. That doesn't mean I approve of it, doesn't mean I disapprove of it, but it means that I think that they're going to uphold birthright citizenship. And if they do, that makes it a lot thornier to remove illegal immigrants, because if you come into this country illegally, but you have a child, a newborn who's a dependent, you can't be deported because you're the child's legal guardian. You're their parent. So we're stuck with your ass. And that's why they're called anchor babies, is because they anchor the illegal family here. But I'll just leave it up to you to decide. But I'm going to go ahead and guess that nobody listening here believes any longer that there are just 11 million illegal aliens in the country. And if you do, let me know what it is you're smoking, because I've never tried drugs before, so the first time is going to be a wild experience. So go ahead and hit me with whatever you got. Moving along to other news, we've got some good news. I love when a story ends well. When a sad, terrible story has a positive ending. I'll just say that. A Detroit pedophile, according to the New York Post, by the way, a Detroit pedophile who admitted murdering a 13-year-old girl he had groomed for years and impregnated has apparently killed himself in federal prison, just over 2 weeks into serving his decades-long sentence. Jarvis Butts, age 43, was found dead inside his cell at the Charles Egler Reception and Guidance Center Thursday morning in Jackson, Michigan, according to the Michigan Department of Corrections, as they told CBS News and as the New York Post is reporting it. Officials said guards attempted life-saving measures on the convicted killer, but were unsuccessful. Michigan State Police are investigating his death as an apparent suicide. Why am I, and probably most of those of you listening to this, a little disappointed that someone didn't apparently take him out themselves? There was a man, and it's all over social media right now, although it happened, God, was it last April? There was a man in a prison somewhere who killed 3 sexual predators and said he would have killed more if he could, and was glad to have performed the service. And to be honest, I think for someone that molests and harms children like that, yeah. Butts was serving a 36 to 50-year sentence, and he was sentenced on March 12th after pleading guilty in February to the 2024 murder of a 13-year-old girl named Naziah Harris. As far as the story reports, the girl's body was never found. Butts was also sentenced to 10 to 15 additional years for raping 2 other young girls, I believe was what the story said. Yeah. Bye. So again, I love it when a sad story has a positive ending. He's gone. The world is well rid of him. And as Dennis Miller said, if you ever feel like you need to take it upon yourself to harm or molest a child, you need to kill yourself. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. If you think that molesting a child is something you need to do, you need to take yourself out. Period. Anybody wants to report this podcast for that? Fuck you. Okay? That means you're supporting these bastards. Okay? I couldn't imagine doing something like that to a child. I can't even wrap my brain around how horrific that is. But you know what? The Alphabet Mafia is trying to normalize that nonsense. We said years ago, it's a slippery slope when it comes to accepting certain types of behavior. And we said, watch, they're going to try to normalize pedophilia. Well, now they are. They're calling them minor attracted persons. Well, my chainsaw is a minor attracted power tool. Or a pervert attracted power tool. That was a misspeak, wasn't it? No, my wood chipper is a pedophile therapeutic device. And it works every time. In other news, I didn't discuss this yesterday, but I need to today in light of other events. And this is awful, but I got to level with you. I'm going to talk about it in another context in a few minutes. And yeah. All right, here we go. Quadruple. Okay, this was the headline. I don't remember if I took a photo of this headline and saved it in my phone or not. So let me look real quick. And hopefully I can find it in here without screwing up the podcast. Let me see if I can find this headline. Because this one was a humdinger. Yeah, there it is. I did. Are you ready? Here we go. Grab your socks and hose and pull, folks. This one is a humdinger. Quadruple amputee, cornhole pro. Okay, there's already a lot to unpack. Charged in passenger's shooting death. a man who is a quadruple amputee cornhole player and a professional cornhole player. Cornhole is that game. I don't know if everyone knows what cornhole is. I'll just tell you real quick. It's a game where you have two basically little wooden ramps that are set, I don't know, maybe 40 feet apart. And there are two teams of two people, one from each team at each end of this thing, next to each cornhole receptacle. It's basically a plank that's elevated on one end by another piece of wood nailed to it. And there's a hole about 4 inches wide in the plank. It's a piece of plywood, basically. And the goal is to take a bag of corn, a little sack of corn, that's not much bigger than the rosin bag that a pitcher uses in baseball, and to throw it through the hole and to get it into the hole on the first try, or to get it as close as possible. And it's scored in a certain way, so, you know, the more accurate you are, the better you do, and so on and so forth. Well, this guy is a quadruple amputee and a cornhole pro. He has been charged with shooting a passenger in his car. Now, before you laugh, I've already seen 3 videos of this man in other contexts loading and firing handguns and rifles. I kid you not. I have seen him put a magazine in a pistol and discharge the pistol. I have seen him load rounds into a rifle and fire the rifle. So he is capable of doing it. On his right arm, he has a little piece of flesh that's a vestigial piece of his arm. I can't say vestigial because that implies that it grew that way. What happened was when he was 10 months old, he got a really bad infection. It went septic, and the only way to save him was to amputate large portions of all 4 of his limbs. And that's how this man became a quadruple amputee. His name is Dayton James Weber. He's 27 years old, and I think he's from Maryland because the crime allegedly happened in Maryland. Dayton James Weber is accused of fatally shooting the front seat passenger of his vehicle during an argument in La Plata, Maryland, which is right across the Chesapeake Bay from the county I live in. I think it's Charles County or Calvert County. I forget where La Plata is. But La Plata is close to Waldorf, and I've been to Waldorf a number of times for work as a sports writer. But they were in an argument in Weber's car in La Plata, and Weber supposedly shot the man. It's Charles County, according to the Charles County Sheriff's Office. The victim, identified as 27-year-old Bradrick Michael Wells, was found dead in a yard in the town of Charlotte Hall, Maryland, according to the Sheriff's Office. We don't know what the argument was about, and that's something hopefully we learn. Charles County Sheriff's Office spokesperson Diane Richardson told WJLA, that's Channel 7, I believe, out of D.C., which is the ABC affiliate in Washington, D.C. My old friend, I think Scott Abraham, is the sportscaster for WJLA, if I'm not mistaken. It's either that channel or Channel 9. I can never remember where he works. Hold on, let me look that up real quick, just so I don't give you the bad information. Yes, he works for WJLA. So this is the channel that a former colleague of mine who worked for Channel 16, in Salisbury, WBOC, now works for WJLA. He took a step up to a bigger market, and now he's in the D.C. market doing good work, as he always did, with that ever-present smile. And Scott's a strikingly handsome fellow, if I do say so myself. And he married Lacey Griffith, who was a co-worker at WBOC, and I believe she has a job with the channel as well, and they live somewhere in the D.C. area. I know where they live, but I'm not going to say it because there's too many weirdos out there. But yeah, that's the channel that an old friend of mine works for. So 2 people were in the back seat of the vehicle, and they apparently witnessed the deadly shooting, the sheriff's office said. Weber allegedly asked them for their help in disposing of the body, but they refused, got out of the car, left the scene, and ultimately flagged down officers with the La Plata Police Department, authorities said. On how Weber allegedly committed the deadly shooting, Richardson told Channel 7 that she would simply refer people to the internet and they could go to his YouTube page. which includes a video of the suspect loading and firing a handgun. As I said, I've also seen 2 other videos of him doing such things. So, there you go. The witnesses reported the shooting just before 10:30 p.m. Saturday, according to Charles County Sheriff. Nearly 2 hours later, an individual reported the victim's body in a yard in Charlotte Hall, which said it then obtained a warrant for Weber's arrest. An officer with the Albemarle County Police Department subsequently located his vehicle, Weber's vehicle, at a gas station in Charlottesville, Virginia, Albemarle County being in Virginia. The suspect was then found at a nearby hospital seeking treatment for an unspecified medical issue, taken into custody upon his release, and charged as a fugitive from justice. He's awaiting extradition to Charles County, because he's still in Virginia where he got arrested, where he will be charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and other charges, according to the Charles County Sheriff's Office. Man, I tell you what. Weber, Wells, and the 2 other passengers in the vehicle were all known to each other, according to the sheriff's office. The incident remains under investigation. It's unclear whether Weber has an attorney, and the ABC affiliate attempted to reach out to a representative for comment through his sponsorship email. Weber is a notable professional cornhole player who was profiled by ESPN in 2023. He was crowned the best cornhole player in Maryland in 2020, and competed in the American Cornhole League World Championships the following year, according to ESPN. The American Cornhole League, it just feels weird saying the word cornhole with a straight face. They addressed his arrest, saying in a statement on Monday, "This is an extremely serious matter, and our thoughts are with all those impacted, including the family and loved ones of Mr. Wells. At this time, this remains an active legal situation." The statement continued, "We respect the judicial process and will not comment on specific allegations or details while proceedings are ongoing." In the documentary where he was featured, Weber called cornhole his calling. And the story goes on to talk about how he became a quadruple amputee. As I said, he was 10 months old, got a bacterial infection, it went septic. And to be honest, usually when you go septic, you don't survive. But he did, and then apparently did this. We'll see. We'll see. We'll follow that as it develops. Now, moving on to our next topic, dragons and gaming and entertainment. I wanted to read something by a fellow known as Legacy Game Mastering who posted this online regarding fan opinions of the Wizards of the Coast apology to Luke Gygax. I'm digging into that again. Luke, of course, being the son of Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson being the men credited with creating the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game, which came out as a 3-book box set in, I want to say, January of 1974. But here's what he said. He said, quote, "I am not coming back to Wizards of the Coast. Not now, and very likely not ever. The company has spent the last decade attacking the very basis of the hobby, including the creators and the people who kept it alive when it was niche. I say niche. It's niche. Sorry. They have attacked anyone who disagrees with the politics of their leadership team and so-called creatives. They have done interviews, posted things on Twitter, and issued disclaimers making it clear that they hate anyone who is not part of their tribal thinking. Add in the fact that they have ruined the rules of the game, and you have a poison that I willingly will not drink. Will not willingly drink, sorry. Bringing in Luke Gygax as a peace offering to those they have alienated is a joke. They have spent years attacking his father as a sexist and a racist monster. It is a cynical ploy. To that point, Wizards of the Coast actually, in digital versions of some of the older books from earlier editions of Dungeons & Dragons, which is in its 5th edition rules now, I'm talking about books from 1st edition specifically, along with 2nd, where they put disclaimers in the book saying that there's content in this that's basically racist, sexist, homophobic, misogynistic, and commits any of the wonderful numbers of isms that the professionally aggrieved love to turn to as an excuse to justify their self-righteous indignation this particular phase of the moon. Regarding Luke Gygax, this man went on to say, "He is, in my opinion, a weak-willed and soft human being. I would have told them to get bent. You broke it, you buy it, in a way. it's going to take a lot more than attaching the Gygax name to a book to prove that they really mean what they're saying. They need to remove the disclaimers from the fronts of old print-on-demand copies and PDFs of the classic books. They need to fire the leadership that approved the destruction of everything that made D&D, well, D&D. They need to apologize publicly to the hobbyists they have spent a decade calling sexist, racist, Nazi, scumbags, and other pejoratives. And maybe, and just a maybe, after that, I would consider coming back. The fellow's name is Kyle, I believe, who wrote this. And Kyle, buddy, you're spot on. I feel exactly the same way. I have digital format versions of just about everything that came out before the end of 3rd edition, and a large portion of 5th edition. I didn't really touch 4th. I didn't like it. It was a good tactical miniatures game, but it wasn't great in terms of being D&D. But anyway, I told you I'd read this on the podcast, and I did, and I thank you for putting it out there and for chatting with me briefly online about it and exchanging a couple messages. So there you go. And again, it's Legacy Game Mastering. I believe he's got a YouTube channel. I just don't know what it is off the top of my head, but decent fellow all around. And he's like me. He's one of the older guard who's been around for decades and isn't having it. The constant revisionism, now they want to basically memory hole the fact that they literally said that white male gamers, or white and male gamers, need to just go away or die. Well, that doesn't sit well with them. And again, the Kathy Hochul reference. Okay, go away. Okay, they went away. Oh, wait, we need your money. Come back. That's it in a nutshell. But moving on to things that are a little bit better, and this applies to all editions of the game, not just the one that's currently used, so I'm going to use it because I still love the game, but the company that owns the rights can kiss my entire ass. And let me tell you something, I got a big one. That would take a little bit of doing. But here's something called the 30-Day D&D Challenge, which I started in a previous podcast. I only did day 1. I didn't do day 2 yet. So here's day 2 of the 30-Day Challenge. It asks, what is your favorite race of creature? Well, usually what they mean is player. I think the graphic actually said, what is your favorite character race? Let me look real quick. Favorite PC or player character race. A player character is one that a player creates and they use in the game, whereas a non-player character is one that's run by the guy who runs the game, also called the Dungeon Master. So, favorite PC race, to make a long story longer, is elves. To me, it's the elves. I think that... See, I read Lord of the Rings in 8th grade the first time. I started it in the spring of 8th grade and read The Fellowship of the Ring, and then I read Two Towers and Return of the King as a freshman in high school. And to my credit, I read Two Towers and Return of the King in 3 weeks. And I was 14, not quite 14, and that took a little bit of doing for me to read 300-some-thousand words in 3 weeks. All right? And instantly fell in love with it because I was already a swords and sorcery kind of guy, and this was one of the building blocks for Dungeons & Dragons, a game that I was already heavily addicted with at the time. And from The Hobbit, you had the Elves of Mirkwood, and then from the Lord of the Rings, you had the Elves of Lorien. Whether it was Elrond half-elven, or whether it was Galadriel, whether it was Legolas, I just love the elves. And then in the D&D game, they were the longest-lived creatures of the core races that you could play. The core races that you could play were humans, dwarves, elves, half-elves, halflings, which were originally called hobbits, but the Tolkien estate sued TSR about that, so they had to get rid of the word hobbits, and they started using halflings. And gnomes. Halflings, gnomes, humans, dwarves, elves, half-elves, and then, of course, half-orcs. So, of the core races, it's elves. Always did, because they had a little bit of magic about them. They had some latent spell ability. They had some ability to resist certain types of spells. They could be swordsmen. They could be wizards. They could do it all. in my opinion. And I loved them because of that, and that is my favorite player character race in D&D. I don't play it every time, but I play it more than any other race. Maybe not a majority of the time, but I play elves more than any other race. Like, for instance, I can't remember the last time I played a gnome, but I've played elves fairly recently. So moving on, we're heading to anecdotal evidence, and this falls under joke time too, but this actually happened. This was me in the 90s. We'll just pick a year and say 1996 at Western Publishing in Cambridge, Maryland. I was working on a binding line, running my gathering machine, and the man who ran the binder that my machine fed its stuff into was a funny man named Paul. And Paul was actually the uncle of a childhood friend of mine that I played D&D with in middle school and high school. But anyway, it's a small world. Same county. So anyway, Paul was running the binder, and every, was it half hour or every hour, we had to pull one book out of the production run and take it over to machines that were called the flex and pull machines. What one of the machines did was you would pull down a clamp on an elastic cord and clamp it onto one of the pages of the book. You would then turn the dial up to a certain speed, and it was like watching an automatic page turner in action, except it only had the one page. And this machine, I hope you can see me moving my arm back and forth. Sorry, audio podcast only. But it would basically, the arm would swing back and forth, and what that did, it was the flex machine, and what it did was it tested the strength of the glue in the spine that held the book together to make sure that the book could handle the stress of pages being turned repeatedly. And if you had to run it for a certain amount of time, and if the page came out during that time, I don't mean if the page ripped, but if the page came out of the glue during that time period, then the book didn't pass, and you had to let people on the binder know because they had to make changes to the glue or to the saw that trimmed the spines so that you could put more glue or less glue or whatever the case was. Then the pull machine, you would take two separate pages from the book and attach it to the pull machine. You would have clamps that would hold the other parts of the book down, and the pull machine literally pulled the page until the page popped out of the book. And it had a gauge to measure how many pounds of pressure it took to pull that page out of the book. And if it wasn't at a certain level, and it varied from type of book to type of book, if it wasn't at a certain level, then the book didn't pass. But if it did, then it made it through the quality assurance checks. Well, the machine operators didn't always run those tests. Sometimes it was the ladies in QA, quality assurance, or originally quality control, but of course they had to change the name to quality assurance because it was PC. But anyway, one of the women who worked in quality was this nice lady named Jackie. And Jackie had a twin sister named Gwen. Well, Gwen worked in the binder department where I worked. Jackie originally, I think, worked in bindery and then transferred over to quality. And quality was a gravy job compared to being a utility in bindery because you could sit almost the whole shift in quality at the quality person's little desk that they had. But anyway, I think Jackie was the one that worked in quality. I can't remember because they were twins and I could never tell them apart. And part of this story is me talking to a coworker about that fact. And at one point, one of the twins walked by and a lady that I worked with, and yeah, this was before the one girl went into quality. A lady that I worked with said, "Hey, Jackie." And of course, as I said, I could not tell the two girls apart. They were identical twins. They didn't always dress alike or anything, but I just couldn't tell them apart. You know, there were twins, Billy and Bobby, that were a couple years younger than me. I guess they still are, right? That graduated a couple years behind me in high school. I could never tell them apart. So when I would walk up to them, I would say, "Hey, because I didn't know whether to say Billy or Bobby. So anyway, Jackie walks by, and my coworker, we'll call her Cheryl. Cheryl says, "Hey, Jackie." And Jackie says, "Hey." And I say, "Hey, Jackie." And Jackie says, "Hey." And we go about the rest of our day. And I asked my coworker Cheryl a minute later, I said, "Cheryl, I got a question for you. How can you tell Jackie and Gwen apart?" Well, her response wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but I guess it was a valid answer. She said, "Oh, I can tell them apart because Gwen's on vacation." So I got no knowledge from the lady at that point. Cheryl was of no help to me. But anyway, here's the joke in the story, the anecdote. One day, Jackie is sitting at her station at the quality thing, and Paul brings a sample book over to her. And I did too, because we were basically setting up the machine, and we ran a few books to test it. So we took one over to the Flex and Pull, and we gave it to Jackie. And Jackie was sitting there eating some food from a local restaurant. Now, the local restaurant is no longer in business. It was called English's Grill. English's restaurant was a small local chain of chicken joints that they had one in Cambridge, and it was less than a mile from where we worked at Western Publishing. And I still remember what that place looked like on the inside and the carry-out section. And, you know, it's imprinted in my brain. I was there a few times. They had a buffet breakfast on the weekends. Oh, God, it was so good because they had Scrapple, but, they had everything. But anyway, Jackie's sitting there eating some coleslaw from English's. And Paul was one of these guys that didn't talk a lot, but when he did, you better watch out, because it was either incredibly insightful or it was downright friggin' hilarious. Well, in this case, it was B. He says, "Jackie, are you eating that English's coleslaw?" Now, Paul was a little guy. I'm 6'3", and at the time I worked there, I weighed around 230 pounds. So I was a fairly big dude. Paul was probably a head shorter than me and might have weighed $140 soaking wet wearing 2 heavy coats. Little slip of a dude. Very small guy. So he had this small guy's voice, and he says to Jackie, "Jackie, you're not eating the coleslaw from English's, are you?" And she stopped and looked at him and said, "Yeah, why?" "Well, I heard there was a guy that was making the coleslaw, and they caught him pissing in the vat." Well, Jackie put her coleslaw down, and pushed it away from her. She was like, "Thanks, Paul." He said, "No, don't worry. They fired him a while back." So she goes, "Oh, okay." Has a little bit of a relieved look on her face. Well, that was the end of that particular incident. Well, a couple days later, we go back over there. Similar situation. We're setting up a new job. We take a book over to Flex and Pull and let Jackie take care of it. While she's putting it on the machine, Paul looks at her table, and yet again, she's got stuff from English's. And Paul says to her, "Hey, Jackie, you remember I was telling you about that guy that got fired from English's for peeing in the coleslaw vat?" She says, "Yeah." And Paul says, "Apparently they hired him back." I was done. I was no more good. That was the end of Dave for that shift. Every time I looked at Paul, he looked at me, and I would bust out laughing. And the machine probably shut down 3 or 4 times, and it didn't totally need to, because I may have accidentally hit the stop button while I was laughing. It was, oh my God, it was hilarious. It was absolutely hilarious. No, and I didn't hit the stop button, but I was probably slow to respond to a couple of minor machine breakdowns, because the sensors on the machine were set a certain way so that if the machine didn't feed properly, then you had to stop, because otherwise you'd run a bunch of bad books. But yeah, apparently they rehired the guy. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm done, man. I'm done. I laughed my head off. And that's been 30 years. And it's still just as funny as the moment it happened. Paul was something to work with. He really was. He's retired now. Living. He actually, when my wife and I had a house in town, we lived like 3/4 of a mile away from him. We would drive by his house on the way to our house. So, and one of his grandsons was actually in Boy Scouts with our oldest son. about 13 or 15 years ago. So there was still a connection there. But anyway, heading to joke time now. And I don't know if this is a joke or another funny anecdote, but this is where we take that quadruple amputee cornhole star thing and turn it on, kind of on its head, because y'all, if you're an adult like me and you're at all into anything about popular culture and funny things on the internet, you're familiar with the concept of Florida man. Now, Florida man is the first two words of headlines of thousands of articles that discuss the various misdeeds of men from Florida and the crazy things they do. Well, like for instance, if you type in your date of birth and then the words Florida man, you will get some kind of a stupid headline. All right, I'm trying to do it, and of course the AI is trying to take over. Let's see. Here we go. Florida man on my birthday in 2023. Florida man faces charges in Villages. Now, I don't know if you know what the Villages are, but the Villages is basically this community in, I want to say, Central Florida that's huge. It's practically its own county that is, it's a residential community that's got thousands of homes in it, and some crazy stuff happens in the Villages. Maybe we'll talk about the pineapple thing some other time. But the headline is, Florida man faces charges in Villages black market erectile dysfunction drug case. Okay. Florida man sentenced to 10 days in jail after he overslept for the trial. Florida man breaks into woman's house, sits on her couch. Oh, God. And makes unusual requests. These are the kind of Florida man headlines that we're talking about here. Okay? That's according to the deputies. I got to read this real quick. Yeah, he apparently went into the house, sat on the woman's couch, and then asked for water and for something to smoke. So, yeah. Well, the Florida man installment we're talking about now. Just when I thought that the Maryland quadruple amputee cornhole champion story won the holy piss pot for wild and crazy headlines, a Florida man story came out the other day, and the headline read as follows: Florida man arrested after attempting to barter ghost he claimed he had trapped in Tupperware container in exchange for store credit at a GameStop. Yeah. So the stakes have been getting higher. Maryland unveils a quadruple amputee who can use guns, and Florida raises the stakes with a dude selling a ghost in a plastic Tupperware container. I tell you what, this one's going to the wire, and right now I would have to say Florida man has pulled ahead. I don't know what to do with this. Talk about a crazy world. This is wild. This is absolutely wild. But we're just about to wrap up here. Got a couple more things to say, then we're going to have a quick final thought, and then I'll get out of your hair for the rest of the weekend. Don't forget now, Chapter 7 of Love's Crucible comes out on the Patreon tomorrow. Shameless plug here, patreon.com/WSPDragons. Patreon.com. Anyway, this isn't a joke. This is a retraction, I guess, of a joke I've made repeatedly. Sorry, that was just a phone falling off the bed here while I'm sitting here. Anyway, I refer to myself as ugly in this podcast from time to time, and, have done so more than once. But I am reliably informed by my wonderful wife that I, in fact, am not ugly. My wife says that instead I am what she calls visually challenging. And I got to level with you. If you ask me, that sounds pretty daggone good. So I'm visually challenging. I think that's great. That sounds really positive. I don't know what you think, but I think that's a lot better than being called ugly. So I am now known as visually challenging and not ugly. So I got that feather in my cap. Now, also, I got another email with an impromptu review of the podcast the other day. It says, and I quote, "I don't know what drug cocktail you're using, but up the dosage. You sound like a freshly clubbed harp seal who took too many diphenhydramine for a head cold and tried to give the Gettysburg Address." The Gettysburg Address, well, that was where Lincoln lived, right? Well, anyway, so now to update the tally of the reviews I've received 2 so far. 0 in favor, 0 opposed, and now we're at 2 undecided. So, hey, don't have any marks against me yet. Final thought for the day is this. The girls that Jarvis Butts raped, I believe they were aged 10, 11, and 13, from what I read, were all older than the girl that the Prophet Muhammad married and had sex with. That girl, Aisha, according to the Quran, was 6 years old on the day she was wed to Muhammad. And she was 9 years old when Muhammad consummated with her. Jarvis Butts just got sentenced to as much as half a century in prison for impregnating after raping a 13-year-old girl. Now, is there anyone else here who doesn't think that that mindset of Muhammad belongs in civilized society? I bet some of you don't think that it does. And those of you that do think it does, stop listening to me, because I got nothing for you. Anyway, that's going to do it for the show today. Make sure to follow this show on Twitter. The handle is at the WSPD Podcast. And if I do say so, I've had some bangers coming out lately. You really need to follow me on Twitter because I've had some amazing one-liners and quips coming out. I am a sarcastic bastard on Twitter, and I'm good at it, and it's funny because I don't just aim to make fun of left-wing lunatics. I aim to entertain and make people laugh. That's part of what I wanted to do with the Twitter account. On TikTok, it's all one big long word, WSP Dragons. More stuff is coming there. Again, there's just not enough time in the day. I'm doing audio podcasts, I'm doing show prep, I'm writing. I got household chores to do, and I have a life outside the podcast, so it takes up some time. But we're getting it there. It's just a matter of cranking it out. It's going to do it. It's going to take a while, and hopefully I'll start sleeping regularly soon. Thought I was there for a couple days, but apparently not. But you can help sponsor us through our Patreon page. It is patreon.com/WSP Dragons. Join us there. You can also help us upgrade our equipment and pay our operating expenses via Cash App and Venmo at both. It's WSPD Pod. And as always, you can hear us on Spotify, where we began. Please follow us there, as well as iHeartRadio, Audible, and Amazon. This is Dave, the Nerd Emperor, signing off. I hope you have a great day, a great rest of your weekend, and go Orioles! Take care now.